Welcome to the channel, friends. Today, we will learn about 10 banned American cars that automakers don't want you to remember. Not all American cars were made to last, and some were made so poorly, so dangerously, or with so many problems that they were eventually banned, recalled, or quietly erased from history. These are the cars that automakers would like you to just forget. Here are 15 banned American cars that they don't want you to remember. Before watching, support the channel by subscribing, and liking your support gives us the strength to move forward. Don't forget to click the bell. Thank you. Number 10, 1971 Ford Pinto. The car Ford wants you to forget. When Ford introduced the 1971 Pinto, it was supposed to be the company's answer to small, affordable imports like the Volkswagen Beetle and the Toyota Corolla. Americans wanted compact, fuel-efficient cars, and Ford rushed to deliver one. The Pinto was lightweight, simple, and inexpensive, exactly what the market seemed to demand. But what Ford didn't expect was that this little car would soon become one of the most infamous and controversial vehicles in American automotive history. A car built under pressure, Ford developed the Pinto on a crashed 25-month timeline, unusually fast for the auto industry, where new models typically took several years to design and test. The mission was clear. It had to be under 2,000 pounds. It had to cost less than 2,000. It had to hit the market before Japanese rivals completely dominated the compact segment. But the rush to production came with serious consequences. The fuel tank disaster. The Pinto's most notorious flaw was its fuel tank placement. The gas tank sat just behind the rear axle in a vulnerable spot with minimal protection in a rear-end collision. Crash tests revealed that even low-speed rear impacts could puncture the tank, causing fuel leaks and fires. The design left the car dangerously exposed, especially when combined with cheap materials and sharp bolts near the tank. What made this worse was the internal corporate decision-making. Ford's own cost-benefit analysis showed that it would have cost about $11 per car to fix the problem during production. But Ford calculated that it would be cheaper to settle lawsuits than to spend millions retrofitting thousands of Pintos. This became one of the most shocking cases of profit over safety in automotive history. The public backlash. By the late 1970s, several lawsuits, investigative journalism, and a damning Mother Jones article brought the Pinto's design flaws into the national spotlight. People were horrified to learn Ford knew about the danger. The Pinto became a symbol of corporate negligence. Public trust in Ford was badly damaged. Eventually, Ford was forced to recall 1.5 million Pintos in 1978, one of the largest safety recalls in history at the time. The legacy of the Pinto. The Pinto was never officially banned by the government, but its reputation was so badly damaged that it became an industry cautionary tale. It's often studied in business ethics classes as an example of what happens when companies put profits ahead of consumer safety. Ford quietly retired the Pinto in 1980, and today, the automaker rarely references the car in its official history. The Pinto's story is not just about a flawed car. It's about what happens when cut corners, rushed engineering, and flawed decision-making collide. Why Ford wants you to forget. The Pinto's gas tank flaw became a national scandal. Lawsuits cost Ford millions. The car's name is still synonymous with danger. It's one of those rare cases where a single car damaged an entire company's public image. The 1971 Ford Pinto wasn't just recalled, it became a symbol of how bad things can go when safety isn't the priority. And that's exactly why Ford would probably prefer you didn't remember it. Number 9, 1973. Chevrolet Chevelle SS, the muscle car that lost its muscle. The 1973 Chevrolet Chevelle SS holds a complicated place in muscle car history. It was part of the third generation of Chevelles, a line that had previously dominated the streets in the late 60s and early 70s with aggressive styling, raw power, and true performance. But by 1973, the American automotive landscape had changed dramatically. The Chevelle SS was still around, but this version was not the same beast. It was reshaped by safety regulations, insurance pressures, and changing public tastes. And many enthusiasts view it as the moment when the muscle car era began to fade. The year of big changes, 1973, was a turning point for all American cars. New federal safety mandates required heavier, reinforced bodies, larger 5mm impact bumpers, revised crash structures. The Chevelle was completely redesigned to meet these requirements. It gained bulkier proportions, a more formal roofline, and a significant increase in curb weight. The once lean and aggressive look was replaced with a softer, rounded style that some fans thought looked bloated compared to earlier models. For many muscle car purists, this wasn't the same Chevelle that tore up drag strips in the late 60s. Still carried the SS badge. Even though the 1973 Chevelle SS looked tamer, Chevrolet still offered the Super Sport SS package. The most powerful engine option was the 454 cubic inch V8, but its output had dropped to 275 horsepower due to stricter emission standards and a new focus on lower compression. Handling was improved with optional radial tuned suspension. Distinctive SS styling cues included stripes, sport wheels, and unique badging. But let's be honest, the muscle was fading. Insurance costs were skyrocketing for high-performance cars. Fuel prices were rising, and the government was tightening emissions rules. The result? Buyers started walking away from big, thirsty muscle cars, and the Chevelle SS struggled to keep its identity. A tough sell in a changing market. The 1973 Chevelle SS faced shrinking demand. More people were moving towards smaller, more fuel-efficient imports, while those still buying domestic cars were starting to prioritize comfort and reliability over raw power. Performance was down, curb weight was up. The magic that made the earlier Chevelles legendary seemed to be slipping away. Sales of the SS package declined quickly, and by the mid-1970s, the muscle car era was on life support. A car that deserves respect. Even though the 1973 Chevelle SS doesn't get the same love as the 1970 SS 454 or the iconic 66 models, it still played an important role. It survived during one of the toughest periods in automotive history. It was one of the last full-size Chevrolets to offer big block power. It introduced safer designs and more refined handling, showing where the American car market was heading. The 1973 Chevelle SS isn't a disgrace. It's a survivor. It represents the transition between the freewheeling muscle car era and the more regulated, efficiency-driven cars of the late 70s. Some might overlook it, but those who truly understand its story see it as an important chapter in Chevrolet's muscle legacy. It may have lost some power, but it never lost its heart. Number 8. 1960 Chevrolet Corvair Monza, the car that dared to be different. The Chevrolet Corvair Monza was one of the boldest cars America had ever seen. Introduced in 1960 and refined throughout the early 60s, the Corvair was Chevrolet's answer to compact, affordable imports like the Volkswagen Beetle, but it was unlike anything else on American roads at the time. The Monza trim, introduced in 1961, quickly became the sportiest and most desirable version of the Corvair. It turned the Corvair from a simple economy car into something stylish, nimble, and exciting to drive. For a brief moment, it was even considered the poor man's Porsche. But the Corvair's story is complicated. A mix of innovation, ambition, public excitement, and ultimately, controversy. The Corvair was radically different. While most American cars in the 1960s used front-mounted engines and rear-wheel drive, the Corvair dared to flip the formula. Rear engine layout. The Corvair had its air-cooled flat-six engine mounted at the back, just like the Porsche 911. No radiator, it was air-cooled, which eliminated the need for a heavy cooling system. Independent suspension, it handled better than most Detroit iron of its day. Lightweight, nimble, and easy to park. The Corvair Monza Coupe and convertible offered bucket seats, floor shifters, and sportier trim. This was a compact car that didn't feel cheap. It had flair. For a while, the Corvair Monza was one of Chevrolet's hottest cars. Sales soared, and young drivers loved its unique style and affordable performance. Ralph Nader's criticism. Then, everything changed. In 1965, consumer advocate Ralph Nader published his book Unsafe at Any Speed, which harshly criticized the Corvair's early swing axle rear suspension. According to Nader, the Corvair's design made it prone to dangerous oversteer and rollover accidents, especially in emergency maneuvers. The book painted the Corvair as a death trap, even though later safety studies, including one by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in 1972, cleared the car of being significantly more dangerous than its contemporaries. But the damage was done. Public perception collapsed. Lawsuits followed, and Chevrolet was forced to heavily revise the suspension in later models. Still, the Corvair's reputation never fully recovered. A car ahead of its time. Ironically, the Corvair Monza was actually an impressive engineering effort. The later models handled beautifully and were praised by automotive journalists. The car offered turbocharged versions as early as 1962, long before most American automakers dared to touch turbo technology. The Corvair's sleek styling and forward-thinking layout showed that Chevrolet could innovate far beyond just building big, traditional sedans. But in the end, market forces, legal battles, and internal GM politics led to the Corvair's quiet exit in 1969. Why it still matters today, the Corvair Monza is a fascinating part of American automotive history. It's respected by car collectors who appreciate its uniqueness. It taught automakers a hard lesson about safety, public perception, and engineering responsibility. It paved the way for more diverse, creative car designs in the decades that followed. The 1960s Chevrolet Corvair Monza wasn't a failure, it was a risk. It broke from the pack and dared to be something different. In some ways, that's the most American thing a car can do. Number 7, 1974 Pontiac Grand Prix SJ455, the last big roar of American luxury muscle. The 1974 Pontiac Grand Prix SJ455 was one of the last true personal luxury coupes from Detroit's golden era of big engines, bold designs, and unapologetic road presence. It came at a time when muscle cars were on the decline, gas prices were rising, and government regulations were tightening. But Pontiac still managed to deliver a car that blended comfort, style, and serious V8 power. For those who remember the 1974 Grand Prix SJ455, it wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It said you wanted power, but you also wanted refinement. You didn't need to burn rubber at every stoplight, but when you stepped on the gas, you expected to feel it, a serious powerhouse. The 455 cubic inch V8 in the SJ trim was the Grand Prix's crown jewel. Even as horsepower ratings were dropping across the industry due to new emissions standards and the switch from gross to net horsepower measurements, the Grand Prix SJ still packed an impressive 250 horsepower and 370 pound-feet of torque. It wasn't the screaming muscle of the late 60s, but it delivered smooth, relentless torque that made highway cruising effortless and acceleration satisfyingly strong for such a large, heavy car. The TH400 automatic transmission and optional posse traction rear end made sure all that power translated to a confident, capable ride, luxury and size. The 1974 Grand Prix wasn't just about muscle. It was a personal luxury car, and Pontiac wanted you to feel it the moment you stepped inside. Plush velour or genuine leather upholstery, deep, comfortable bucket seats, wood grain accents and sporty round gauges, an optional 8-track stereo and power everything. The Grand Prix's extra-long hood and short rear deck design gave it a commanding road presence, and its hidden headlights, bold split grille, and aggressive stance made it look fast even standing still. It was the kind of car that turned heads not because it was flashy, but because it carried itself with quiet authority. A turning point for American cars. By 1974, the automotive world was changing rapidly. The oil crisis was in full swing. Federal safety regulations forced larger, energy-absorbing bumpers that made many cars, including the Grand Prix, look heavier and bulkier. Insurance rates on big engine cars were skyrocketing. Emissions rules were tightening. The Grand Prix SJ455 was one of the last large displacement cars before downsizing took over the American market. While the muscle car era was fading, Pontiac's Grand Prix SJ held on as a dignified, luxurious alternative, a bridge between the raw power of the 60s and the more subdued, efficiency-focused cars of the late 70s. Why it deserves respect. The 1974 Pontiac Grand Prix SJ455 doesn't always get the same attention as earlier muscle icons, but it deserves its place in history. It offered a sophisticated blend of performance and comfort. It survived one of the most difficult periods in the American car industry. It marked the end of the truly big, truly bold personal luxury coupes. It was a car for people who still wanted to enjoy the road. People who believed driving could be both powerful and elegant. Today, the Grand Prix SJ455 is a rare and underappreciated classic. It stands as a reminder of the era when American cars were unafraid to go big, unafraid to be different, and unafraid to let you feel the road. Number 6. 1972 Buick Riviera Boattail, the bold American cruiser that refused to blend in. The 1972 Buick Riviera Boattail is one of the most daring and polarizing designs ever to come out of Detroit. At a time when most American automakers were playing it safe with big, squared-off bodies, Buick went in the opposite direction. They built a car that was long, low, curvy, and impossible to mistake for anything else on the road. Today, the Boattail Riviera is a cult classic, loved by enthusiasts who appreciate its uniqueness, but often overlooked by mainstream collectors who didn't quite know what to make of it when it was new. The design that turned heads and raised eyebrow, the 1972 Riviera was the second year of the bold third-generation design, which debuted in 1971 and ran through 1973. It was famously inspired by classic boat-tail speedsters of the 1930s and, strangely enough, by the split-window 1963 Corvette Stingray, which had been the work of the same designer, Bill Mitchell. The most striking feature was the tapered rear end known as the Boattail, which swept to a dramatic point at the back of the car. The long hood, fastback roofline, and deeply sculpted sides made the Riviera look powerful and fast, even at a standstill. The wraparound rear glass was gorgeous, but notoriously difficult to see out of. It was longer than 2.18 inches, yet beautifully proportioned from certain angles. People either loved it or hated it. There was no in-between. Under the hood, big block power, the 1972 Riviera wasn't just about looks. It came standard with Buick's massive 455 cubic inch V8, delivering a healthy 250 horsepower and 370 lb-ft of torque net ratings, which had just replaced the older gross system in 1972. While emissions regulations and the gas crisis were already beginning to choke muscle cars, the Riviera still had plenty of low-end torque and cruising power. It was built for smooth, commanding highway drives, not drag races. The Riviera was never about straight-line speed alone. It was about effortless, grand touring. Luxury Buick style inside, the Riviera was plush and loaded with features for its time. Optional leather seats and deep pile carpets, power windows, power seats, tilt steering, full instrumentation with a sweeping speedometer, available 8-track stereo for top-of-the-line entertainment. This was a personal luxury coupe meant to make the driver feel like they were piloting something special. And despite some cost-cutting in materials compared to earlier years, Buick still delivered an upscale experience. Why it faded, and why it matters, no. Despite its bold designing, the Boattail Riviera didn't sell as well as Buick had hoped. Many buyers found it too unconventional, and the fuel crisis of the mid-1970s pushed people towards smaller, more efficient cars. By 1974, Buick softened the Riviera's look, moving away from the Boattail in favor of more traditional lines. The radical experiment was over. But today, the 1972 Buick Riviera Boattail is a treasure. Its styling is finally being appreciated for the risk it took and the artistry it carried. It stands out at car shows. It has a loyal enthusiast following. It's one of the most recognizable American cars of the early 70s. It may not have been perfect. Rear visibility was poor, and gas mileage was predictably terrible. But it had character, it had presence, and it was unapologetically Buick. The 1972 Riviera Boattail is a reminder of what happens when an automaker dares to break the mold. Sometimes it takes decades for people to realize that's exactly what makes a car great. Number 5. 1970s Chevrolet Monte Carlo, the birth of an American icon. The Chevrolet Monte Carlo of the 1970s wasn't just a car, it was the embodiment of the American personal luxury coupe. When it debuted in 1970, it didn't aim to be the fastest car on the road or the most affordable. Instead, it promised style, comfort, and just enough power to satisfy. Over the decade, the Monte Carlo carved out its own identity and became a symbol of attainable luxury and street presence. Let's take a respectful, honest look at why the Monte Carlo became such a beloved part of Chevrolet's history. A new kind of Chevy, the first generation Monte Carlo, 1970 to 1972, was Chevrolet's answer to the growing personal luxury market, competing with cars like the Pontiac Grand Prix and Ford Thunderbird. It was based on the mid-size A-body platform, shared with the Chevelle, but it carried a longer front end, a formal roofline, and a more upscale interior. Long hood, short deck. This classic muscle car proportion gave the Monte Carlo a commanding road presence. Hidden strength. Under the hood, buyers could spec engines ranging from the base 350 small block V8 to the monstrous 454 cubic inch big block, producing up to 360 horsepower in the SS 454 variant. Comfort and class. Inside, the Monte Carlo offered plush seating, simulated wood trim, and optional amenities like air conditioning and an 8-track stereo. The Monte Carlo wasn't a pure muscle car. It was a refined cruiser with muscle car options. It struck a balance that buyers loved. Mid-decade evolution. The second-generation Monte Carlo, 1973 to 1977, saw the model grow larger and even more luxurious. Federal safety regulations added big bumpers, but Chevrolet embraced the look, making the car even more formal and substantial. The 1973 Monte Carlo won Motor Trend's Car of the Year, thanks to its smooth ride, elegant design, and wide range of trims and engine choices. The Monte Carlo emphasized comfort over outright speed, offering soft suspensions, velour interiors, and upscale options like power everything and vinyl roofs. Performance gradually took a back seat as emissions and insurance costs reshaped the muscle car landscape. But the Monte Carlo remained a strong seller because it delivered exactly what people wanted: big, stylish, comfortable cars. A lasting legacy. By the late 70s, the Monte Carlo was one of Chevrolet's best-selling cars. It represented the American dream on wheels, a little bit sporty, a little bit classy, and very approachable. While it never had the hardcore reputation of cars like the Camaro or Chevelle SS, the Monte Carlo made its mark in other ways. It became a staple in NASCAR racing, with its aerodynamic design helping drivers dominate the tracks. It developed a cult following in car culture, especially in lowrider and custom communities, where its bold lines and long body were perfect canvases for personalization. It survived through oil crises, regulation shifts, and changing consumer tastes, proving it had staying power. The Monte Carlo's place in history. The 1970s Chevrolet Monte Carlo wasn't the fastest, the flashiest, or the rarest, but it was one of the most balanced and versatile cars of its time. It offered muscle when you wanted it, comfort when you needed it, style that still holds up decades later. It's a car that earned its respect not through extremes, but through consistency, good design, and a little bit of quiet swagger. For many, the Monte Carlo wasn't just a Chevy, it was the car that fit their lives perfectly. And in the grand story of American cars, that's a legacy worth celebrating. Number 4, 1977 Ford LTD II, the forgotten full-size that tried to do it all. The 1977 Ford LTD II is one of those cars that often gets overshadowed in American automotive history. It wasn't a Mustang, it wasn't a Bronco, and it certainly wasn't part of Ford's most celebrated muscle car lineage. But the LTD II played an important role in the changing car landscape of the late 1970s, a time when buyers wanted size, comfort, and presence, but were becoming increasingly concerned about fuel prices and practicality. The LTD II was Ford's attempt to bridge the gap between the shrinking midsize segment and the still large full-size market. It was stylish, it was big, and it aimed to be the all-purpose car for the American family. The successor to the Torino, the LTD II officially replaced the Ford Torino in 1907, even though it wasn't much more than a heavily updated Torino under the skin. Ford gave it a new name, fresh styling, and a more upscale image, hoping to push it into the growing personal luxury market. Design. The LTD II carried a long hood, a squared-off formal roofline, and sharp body creases that made it look sleek for its size. The front end featured a split grille and quad headlights that made it unmistakably Ford. Trim options: buyers could choose from a base model, a mid-range Brougham, and a sportier S version, all available as a coupe, sedan, or station wagon. Size: even though it was technically marketed as a midsize, the LTD II was huge by modern standards, stretching over 216 inches long. Under the hood, the LTD II offered a range of V8 engines that prioritized smooth cruising over high performance. By 1977, the muscle car era was gone, and the LTD II reflected that shift. The base engine was a 302 cubic inch V8, but most buyers opted for larger options like the 351, 400, or 460 V8s. Horsepower was modest due to tightening emission standards, but torque was plentiful. These cars were built to float comfortably down the highway, not to tear up the streets. The LTD II's ride was soft and easygoing. It was a car designed for long straight roads, where comfort mattered more than handling precision. Luxury aspirations. Ford positioned the LTD II as a more affordable alternative to bigger, more expensive, full-size cars. The Brougham trim in particular focused on plush interiors, simulated wood accents, velour upholstery, and optional features like air conditioning, power seats, and cruise control. It wasn't a Lincoln, but it gave middle-class buyers a taste of that full-size luxury experience. Why it faded away? Despite a strong first year of sales, the LTD II quickly fell out of favor by the late 70s. Gas prices were climbing, downsizing was accelerating across the industry, and buyers were moving towards smaller, more efficient vehicles. By 1979, Ford discontinued the LTD II. The market had shifted too fast, and the car's large size and old-school engineering no longer made sense. Why it still deserves respect, the 1977 Ford LTD II is often forgotten, but it holds a unique place in Ford's history. It marked the end of an era for big, body-on-frame American coupes and sedans. It tried to balance tradition and modernity, offering the look and feel of a full-size car on a slightly smaller platform. It reflected the tastes, challenges, and compromises of American car buyers in the late 1970s. Today, the LTD II is an interesting, underappreciated classic. It may not command the attention of collectors like Mustangs or Thunderbirds, but for those who remember it, it was a solid, comfortable, and quietly stylish machine. In the grand story of American cars, the LTD II was one of the final chapters of big, soft, unapologetically roomy cruisers. And that's a legacy worth remembering. Number 3, 1976 Ford Mustang II. The striped muscle that couldn't roar, the 1976 Mustang II Cobra II is one of the most misunderstood Fords ever built. Born in a time when America's muscle car era was fading fast, it wore the stripes and spoilers of high performance. But under the surface, it told a very different story. Still, the Cobra II is worth a closer look, not because it was the fastest Mustang ever made, but because of what it represents: survival, styling, and Detroit's attempt to keep muscle alive in a post-gas crisis world. The Mustang's identity crisis. By the mid-1970s, the Mustang had changed dramatically from its original 1964 half debut. The pony car market had shifted. Emissions regulations, rising insurance premiums, and the 1973 oil crisis all forced automakers to rethink performance. In 1974, Ford downsized the Mustang completely and introduced the Mustang II, a smaller, more fuel-efficient car based on the Pinto platform. Many purists were furious. This wasn't the Mustang they remembered. But Ford wasn't blind. They knew people still loved the look of performance, even if they couldn't afford the gas or insurance for real horsepower. Enter the Cobra II. The 1976 Mustang Cobra II was Ford's answer to the demand for excitement without excess. It wasn't a new engine option or a power package. It was a styling package designed to evoke the look of the Shelby Mustangs of the 1960s. Racing stripes? Absolutely. Wide stripes down the hood, roof, and deck lid. Window louvers and front air dam? Standard. Spoilers and Cobra II decals everywhere. The Cobra II looked fast. It looked cool. And for a generation of buyers who had never seen a Shelby GT350 in person, that was enough. What was under the hood? This is where the Cobra II's story turns more honest. The base engine was a 2.30 four-cylinder, far from thrilling. Optional engines included a 2.8L V6 and a 302 cubic inch V8. The V8 offered only 140 horsepower, saddled with emissions gear, and paired with a 3-speed automatic or 4-speed manual. So no, the Cobra II wasn't a tire-shredding monster, but it wasn't trying to be. It was about image and attitude, a product of its time, and Ford made no apologies. Legacy of the Cobra II. Today, the Mustang II generation is often dismissed by enthusiasts, but it deserves a second look. It kept the Mustang alive through one of the toughest decades in American automotive history. It introduced styling elements that kept the car relevant to a younger audience. It became a pop culture icon, most famously driven by Farrah Fawcett in Charlie's Angels, which didn't hurt sales. And importantly, it laid the groundwork for the Mustang's rebirth in the 1980s. In the end, the 1976 Ford Mustang II Cobra II wasn't built for drag strips. It was built for a new era. One of rising fuel prices, changing consumer expectations, and increasing government regulations. Was it fast? Not really. Was it flashy? Absolutely. Did it keep the Mustang name alive when so many other muscle cars died? Yes, and for that alone, the Cobra II earns a place in Mustang history. Not as a high-performance hero, but as a survivor with stripes. Number 2, 1980 Chevrolet Citation, GM's great hope that turned into a headache. In 1980s, the American auto industry stood at a crossroads. Fuel economy, front-wheel drive, and downsizing were the future. And General Motors needed a bold response. That answer was the Chevrolet Citation, a compact car that promised innovation, efficiency, and space in a modern, affordable package. It was supposed to be the future of GM, but instead it became a cautionary tale. Let's take a respectful and honest look at the 1980 Chevrolet Citation, a car that broke records at first, then broke reputations later. A revolutionary beginning. The Citation was Chevrolet's first front-wheel drive car, a huge change for a company that had built its reputation on rear-drive V8s and full-size comfort. The idea was simple: give buyers a smaller, lighter, more efficient car that still felt roomy and familiar. Built on GM's new X-Body platform, the Citation was one of 4 badge-engineered cars, alongside the Pontiac Phoenix, Oldsmobile Omega, and Buick Skylark. It featured transverse front-wheel drive, McPherson strut suspension, and a fully unibody design. Major technological leaps for GM in 1980. It offered a modern hatchback shape with clever packaging and tons of interior space for a compact. On paper, the Citation had it all: new engineering, better fuel economy, and a price that undercut the imports. A sales smash. At first, Chevrolet launched the Citation with a huge national ad campaign. People were curious, excited, even skeptical. But that didn't stop the initial rush. In its first year, the Citation sold over 800,000 units, making it one of GM's most successful product launches ever. Buyers were drawn to its versatility, offered in 2-door, 4-door, and 5-door hatchbacks, optional V6 power, including the 2.8L engine, which made it peppier than most compacts, a car that felt new but still came from a trusted name like Chevrolet. For a moment, it looked like GM had pulled off the perfect pivot, the fall from grace. Unfortunately, the excitement didn't last. Within just a couple of years, the Citation's reputation began to collapse, and fast. Poor build quality was rampant. Owners reported squeaks, rattles, misaligned body panels, and electrical issues. The braking system, particularly in early models with rear drum brakes, was unpredictable and even dangerous in some situations. The suspension design, praised at launch, turned out to be unstable under hard braking or sharp cornering. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration even investigated handling issues. It wasn't just one flaw, it was many small, fixable problems that added up to a larger story of rushed development and broken promises. A legacy of what could have been. By the mid-1980s, the Citation name was all but toxic. GM tried to patch things up with the Citation II, a slightly improved version, but the damage was done. By 1980, the car was gone, a short-lived experiment with long-lasting lessons. Despite its failures, the Citation did play a role in GM's evolution. It introduced front-wheel drive to millions of Americans. It paved the way for better, more refined compacts down the road. It proved that innovation without execution is a recipe for disaster. Final thoughts. The 1980 Chevrolet Citation was bold, forward-thinking, and absolutely what GM needed, in theory. But in reality, it became a symbol of missed opportunity and corporate overreach. It taught the industry that technology must be matched with quality and that buyers would not forgive sloppiness, no matter the promise. It's easy to laugh at the Citation now, but the truth is it was one of the most important failures in GM's history. And for that reason alone, it's worth remembering. Number 1. 1980 Ford Fairmont, the sensible car that quietly changed everything. The 1980 Ford Fairmont might not turn heads at a car show or stir nostalgia the way a Mustang or Thunderbird might, but its significance in Ford's history runs deep. This unassuming mid-size car was never about flash. It was about function, practicality, and future-proof design. And believe it or not, it helped lay the foundation for Ford's entire vehicle lineup in the 1980s and beyond. Let's take a serious look at why the 1980 Fairmont deserves far more credit than it usually gets. Born from downsizing, by 1980, the American car market had changed dramatically. The oil crises of the 1970s forced automakers to build smarter, lighter, and more efficient cars. Full-size sedans were falling out of favor, and buyers wanted economy without sacrificing comfort. Ford responded with the Fairmont, introduced in 1978. By 1980, it had matured into one of the company's most important models. It was built on the all-new Fox platform, a lightweight rear-wheel drive chassis that would go on to underpin everything from the Mustang to the Lincoln Continental. The Fairmont's design was boxy and conservative, but that was intentional. Straight lines meant easier manufacturing and more interior space. It came in several body styles: sedan, wagon, coupe, and even a rare Futura two-door with sporty touches. Engine options for everyone. The 1980 Fairmont wasn't a performance car, but it offered a wide range of engines for every kind of buyer. A 2.3L inline-4 for economy-minded drivers, a 3.30L inline-6, also known as the 200 cubic inch 6, and for those wanting more power, a 302 cubic inch 5.0L V8 was available. Rare for such a lightweight mid-size car, that flexibility was part of what made the Fairmont popular. Whether you wanted fuel efficiency or traditional V8 power, it could be tailored to your needs. Practical and spacious. Despite its relatively compact size by American standards, the Fairmont was remarkably roomy inside. Thanks to its squared-off design, the cabin had great visibility and usable space for passengers and luggage. The wagon version was especially popular with families who wanted economy without sacrificing practicality. The interior was simple, but functional. No fancy wood trim or cutting-edge tech, just solid materials and intuitive controls. Ride quality was soft, steering was light, and it was easy to park, especially important as more Americans moved to suburbs and needed daily drivers, not just weekend cruisers. A platform that built a generation. What truly makes the 1980 Ford Fairmont special is what came after it. The Fox platform it introduced became Ford's backbone for over a decade, supporting legendary models like the Fox Body Mustang, 1979 to 1993, the Lincoln Continental, the Mercury Capri, the Ford LTD, and even early Thunderbirds of the 1980s. Without the Fairmont, the iconic Mustangs of the 80s and early 90s might never have existed in the form we know today. Legacy, quiet success. The Fairmont was not flashy, fast, or luxurious, but it did its job extremely well. It was affordable, easy to repair, fuel efficient, spacious, and versatile, and then foundational to Ford's engineering strategy. It's a car that doesn't get much attention today, but for a generation of drivers and for Ford's future planning, the Fairmont was absolutely essential. Final thought, the 1980 Ford Fairmont is proof that not every important car needs to be glamorous. Sometimes the most lasting impact comes from smart design, solid engineering, and practical purpose. It wasn't built to impress, it was built to work. And in that, it succeeded beyond anyone's expectations.